powerful man stood at the roof, staring into space. He stood in his red martial arts gown with a cold expression, like he didn't care about anything or anyone. His name is Dongfang Bubai, the leader of the Sun-Moon Divine Cult sect in the martial arts world. Dongfang Bubai's legend epitomized power, betrayal, and enigmatic martial arts mastery, a testament woven into the very fabric of this hallowed legacy. He is a very ruthless man who has the goal of uniting the world together. He is the Grand Master who can defeat 100,000 soldiers in no time. His name is known by people around the dynasty, and he is a feared leader. Anytime he starts a war, blood splatters everywhere, with bodies piled up around the warfield. He is a feared warrior. On the day he was going to unite the world together under his leadership, the wicked orthodox sect of other clans betrayed him. They decided to unify and kill him to end his reign, which was something he hadn't expected. On that particular day, the clans sent their disciples to the warfield to kill Dongfang Bubai. This was something they had been planning for a long time, and they wouldn't want anything to ruin their plans. One of the disciples of the clan stabbed him in his stomach without any remorse. Dongfang Bubai smirked evilly when he got stabbed in the stomach by a disciple of one of the sections. These were people that he had under his wings and protected. Yet they had betrayed him just when he had sent his heavenly soldiers out for a mission. Because of what they did, he started massacring the people at the warfield without care and with the sword that was stabbed into his stomach. The people flooded towards him with force, trying to take his life, thinking they had subdued him because he was kneeling in front of them with the sword in his stomach. They told him to surrender and face the consequences of his evil deeds. They stood there, ready to strike again in case he moved. But things took another turn. Dongfang Bubai smiled as he listened to everything they said while kneeling in front of them. They had turned rebellious just to achieve their goal, after he had taken them and brought them to glory. Seeing him still fine and smiling, fear gripped the hearts of the people who had stabbed him and wanted to kill him. They had not expected that he could still move after being stabbed in the stomach. Dongfang Bubai raised his eyes and stared at them with a deadly expression and so much killing intent. He drew out the sword that had been stabbed into his stomach without a trace of pain. He had the aura to kill, to shed blood for their betrayal. As he drew out the sword from his stomach, his blood splattered out, but his expression wasn't that of pain at all. Seeing that he had stood up and the sword was in his hands, they were shocked and afraid. They didn't understand how he could still be fine with such a deep injury in his stomach. And to make matters worse, he looked like he could still fight, which was something they had not expected. His face didn't look like that of an old man. He looked like a man in his 30s, not 80. Dongfang Bubai is an 80-year-old man, but he looks young. People couldn't help but wonder how he looked this young. Sometimes they do know that he uses a martial arts skill to do that, but they cannot figure out which skill it is. The sword they had stabbed into his stomach was the Heaven's Pivot, a sword that relied on heaven, a sword they had thought would kill Dongfang Bubai. They saw the sword in Dongfang Bubai's hand had been burned to ashes, like it was a piece of paper. They were shocked because it was Heaven's Pivot. Who would have expected that it would turn to ashes in his hands? They were shocked and speechless at the same time. They couldn't believe that the world-famous sword would melt so easily, like it was nothing. The fear in their voices gripped their hearts as sweat ran down their faces because they knew that what was to come next wasn't good. As they were thinking of what to do next, a man walked up from behind them and told them that he would like to give it a trial, to defeat Dongfang Bubai. His name is Ling Huan, the disciple of Mount HCT, the owner of Heaven's Pivot sword that had been burned to ashes by Dongfang Bubai. He steps forward and says he wants to kill the demonic head with his own hands. They were worried about him and reminded him that he had an internal injury and he just lost his sword, so they didn't know if it was going to be okay to fight with Dongfang Bubai in that state. He told them that they don't have to worry because his sword techniques are not picky about weapons, so even if he had lost his initial weapon, he could still fight him with another weapon. He grounded against Dongfang Bubai by telling him that his evil deeds were about to end. For every disciple that had died fighting him, including the disciples of the mountain sect, thumbs up. And he told him that even for a single day, they couldn't live under the same heaven with him because he had caused great chaos to the world. And as far as he is still alive, no one would be at peace. Dongfang Bubai looked at him with a cold, funny expression because he found his words funny. Dongfang Bubai gave a little laughter and asked, "Who is the one that shoulders the heaven?" Which provoked Ling Huan to ask him if he was telling him to indulge in wordplay with him. At that moment, Dongfang Bubai's eyes turned white, as did his hands, and he started making some incantations. These incantations were no small incantations. They were dangerous incantations that affected the disciples there at the warfield. Ling Huan heard the incantation that was resounding through the heavens and then guessed that it was a sound transmission. At the same time, Everyone there was screaming in pain because of the voice they were hearing. He stood above them all, standing straight with his hands spread out above the heavens. Below him, the people were screaming out in pain and they were in tears. They wanted it to stop, but it wouldn't stop. They kept on screaming louder and they tried blocking the sounds by covering their ears, but to no avail. Due to the amount of sound transmission that they were hearing, they started throwing up blood because of the incantation. They started turning pale, looking lifeless like their soul had been sucked out, remaining their physical body. They were bleeding in every part of their body, their eyes, ears, nose, mouth and so on. Seeing that the pain they were facing was unbearable, they knew that the only way to escape such pain and suffering was to kill themselves. So they had to draw out their swords and kill themselves. Some slit their throats while others stabbed themselves. Death was the best way to escape such a traumatizing situation. They knew that even if they got out of that situation, it would still haunt them, and Dongfang Bubai wouldn't spare them since they served themselves on his doorstep. To be able to fight 100,000 soldiers without much work, they knew he was no ordinary man. People who had already killed themselves could be seen on the battlefield. Some had the sword in their stomach while others had a slit in their throat. Dongfang Bubai stood before the dead bodies that were piled up on the battlefield. They had killed themselves. Because they couldn't end the year, the sound transmission between him and the heavens, 100,000 soldiers were wiped out with just an incantation by Dongfang Bubai. Ling Huan was shocked when he saw what had happened. The bodies of his fellow disciples were all around the battlefield, with blood everywhere and injuries all over his body. The fear and shock on his face were very much visible for anyone to see. He knelt before Dongfang Bubai while coughing out blood. He hadn't expected things to turn out this way. The man that they had come to fight stood before him without many injuries on his body and with an unconcerned expression. Dongfang Bubai had asked him if he knew the reason why he had spared him, but he replied by shunning him and calling him a devil, telling him that he wouldn't tell him the whereabouts of their sect's powerful martial arts manual. Hearing what Dongfang Bubai had said, he was very shocked because he had thought that he wanted the martial arts manual. He had thought that that was the reason for his massacre. But he was wrong. He knew that he needed something else. Dongfang Bubai stood before him with a funny expression on his face while he was making gestures with his hands toward his face, meaning that what he wanted was his face, not the manual, because he wouldn't want such a low-level martial arts manual. He stretched out his hands towards his face and then made him dormant for some time before he was ready to take his face. Doing so, Ling Huan looked lifeless with the injuries on his body. Ling Huan could not help but think about his pregnant wife who was at home. Someone he would love to go back to. But now, it seemed that there was no going back because he knew that this was going to be his last moment. And then his unborn child, whom he had hoped he would teach the martial arts skills he possessed so that he could grow up to be a fine warrior or martial arts grandmaster. He couldn't help but think of all the things he had missed out on because of this war. He lay there with blood all over his body, in the piles of dead bodies of his fellow disciples who had sacrificed their lives fighting Dongfang Bubai. He knew that this was going to be his last moment, and he didn't know what was to come after his death. The blood splatter was real. The battle was inevitable for that day, and the result was expected. Dongfang Bubai stared at Ling Huan, who lay on the ground with injuries all over his body and blood everywhere. His expression was calm because he knew that the war was over. Relief was all over his face with some scratches from the fight. Ling Huan stared at Dongfang Bubai with shock written all over his face. He just couldn't understand why there was someone who was so unbeatable, and at the same time he could utilize the power of the heavens. But now he knew why. It was because he was a heavenly demon. A feared heavenly demon. He stared at his smiling face with dizzy eyes and the sword that was in his hands. He had no remorse in his eyes, even standing before so many dead bodies. Dongfang Bubai threw the heaven pivot sword to the floor. To achieve his goal, he created a rumor that Dongfang Bubai was dead and that he was killed by Ling Huan, Mount H's first disciple. Soon the news spread to the whole dynasty that he was dead. Ling Huan had a fearful expression on his face. His mouth was sealed with something so he couldn't scream out for help. He had always been finding himself in such a situation for a while now, but he had no idea why he always found himself in such a situation. He lay on a flat surface naked with his hands cuffed to each side. Of the flat board he is lying on, the same goes for his legs as they were spread and cuffed. He was sweating profusely because he knew just why exactly he was there. He was about to be castrated. He turned and stared at the man who was about to perform the castration on him. The lights were on and he could see his face. He was sweating and wiggling around to know if he could escape, but he was bound tightly by the cuffs on his hands and feet. The knives that will be used for the castration are visible and on the table. This was another thing that had put fear in his body. The weapons had blood on them, which indicates that they had just been used or hadn't been cleaned yet. The old man who was going to castrate him turned and faced him. He looked ugly with only one eye left on his face. He had an evil look on his face as he was about to perform the castration on him. He took one of the castration tools that he was going to use, lifted it and walked toward Linus Jiang, who was lying on the board where he was going to be castrated by the old ugly-looking man. He froze when he saw the tool brought close to him and was about to be used. He tried to scream but to no avail because his mouth was sealed. He tried to break free from the cuffs holding his hands and legs, but it wasn't working. Suddenly he woke up from sleep because of the dream. He has been having this dream for a while now, countless times, and he has no idea why he kept on having the same dream over and over again. A dream of him being castrated. He hurriedly checked his body to be sure that he was okay. He was sweating crazily and his face was red. The worried expression on his face said it all about how he felt. To make sure he was still fine, he had to check his lower part to be sure his manhood was still there. Suddenly, the sect instructor woke up from the noises he was making. Jiang, who is the sect instructor and also sleeping in the same room with him, was not happy that Jiang had disturbed his sleep because of some dreams. Jiang cursed Jiang and asked him if it was hard to sleep quietly, calling him a useless bastard. Jiang apologized and complained about his nightmare. Jiang didn't care and told him that if he made a ruckus again, he would make him sleep outside. Jiang was not happy when he heard what the instructor said, and he couldn't help but think that maybe if he had come from an ordinary family like the other kids, would the instructor Jiang still be treating him harshly? The next day, Jiang woke up all the students so that they could start practicing their martial arts skills. He told them to get up and prepare to start their usual practice. But as others were preparing to leave and head to the practice ground, Jiang sighted Jiang and told him to wait until later, that he would like to talk to him about something. Jiang put on a worried and shocked expression when Jiang called him out to wait a bit for them to talk. Seeing how worried Jiang was, a seemingly nice and kind fellow disciple approached him and comforted him, telling him everything was going to be fine. His name is Among Yum. He is the strongest on the team and also the kindest they have had on the team. As he patted his head and comforted him, the others also did the same. They couldn't help but wonder why the instructor had told Jiang to wait for him. They know that the instructor had always been picking on Jiang, but there was nothing they could do about it. Looking at the fact that Chang Yong was the strongest in the team and also the kindest they had on the team, he couldn't help but be jealous of him. He wished he had as much power as Chang Yum had. After the other students left, their instructor proceeded to ask Jiang the kind of nightmare he had last night since he had been having trouble sleeping for days now. He asked him this question with a stern expression. Jiang was shocked when he heard the question that the instructor had asked him. His expression blackened. He didn't want to tell Jiang what he had dreamt of or been dreaming about lately. He knew it was going to be an embarrassing situation, so he had to make up something and tell Jiang. So he made up something and told Jiang that it was the dream that had been giving him nightmares for days. After listening to everything Jiang said, Jiang called Jiang an idiot for being scared of a dream that doesn't seem serious. Jiang was not happy when he heard what Jiang called him. What he hated the most was being called an idiot. After their discussion, Jisong remembered the selfish Orthodox sect and cursed them. He remembered that they were the ones who said that they would share difficulties no matter what problem they each had, but they did the opposite of what they said. And he indicated that that was the reason Jiang should become strong because he knew that they were like a time bomb. They would attack any sect without care and kill them. Jiang, who just finished the dream talk with Jiang, was rushing to class because he was late. Jiang organized the students together and told them that the sparring they were supposed to have that afternoon had been cancelled because they would be having a lot of fights tomorrow. So they needed to learn and cultivate the inner tech technique. The students were speechless when they heard what he said. They thought they would be sparring, which was way more interesting. Some of the students complained that it was going to be a boring teach to just sit and cultivate the martial arts inner K. They said it out nervously in fear that they didn't know what their instructor would say or do. Jisong, after hearing what one of the students said, asked him if he would like to clean out the tossed hall or prepare the training ground for tomorrow's event. The student refused immediately and assured him he would do his best to train well. As they all sat down and started cultivating, he started guiding them on what to do to succeed in the inner K cultivation. He told them to learn basic breathing by silently breathing through their nose. He stood up and started walking around the students to make sure that they were doing fine and following the correct cultivation basic steps. He told them to recite the principle of the 6 harmonies. He told them to picture the moment when the heavens and earth in 4 directions become one. He said that he saw Chang Yam doing it correctly, and he couldn't help but praise that he was doing it much better than when he was in his younger days. Suddenly, he turned pale when his eye diverted to that of Jiang, who was sitting at the back of the training ground. Fear was visible in his eyes because he knew that it was the opposite of what he was teaching them. What Jiang was doing was dangerous. Everyone sitting beside Jiang was shocked by what they saw. They had to scoot over to avoid being hurt as they thought because of training, and the result the others had to stop their training to watch. They saw the light that surrounded him as he sat there. They were even more shocked because the light was so bright and blinding. They surrounded him and started asking what that was and what he was doing to them. He seemed to have done way better at the inner K cultivation. Jae Young immediately screamed out to Jiang angrily to stop the cultivation. Jiang was shocked when he heard him scream out that to him. He didn't know what happened and why he told him to stop the cultivation. Seeing that Jae was done cultivating and was back to his senses, the other disciples rushed towards him happily to inquire how he had done it. They kept on praising him and asking him, but Jiang was confused. As they were talking, the instructor immediately came up behind Jiang without his knowledge. Jiang turned out of shock to check out who was behind him and then saw the instructor standing there with a cold, angry expression. The instructor slapped Jiang before he could realize what was happening. Jiang was shocked because he had not expected that the instructor would slap him just after the inner key cultivation. The instructor sat all the disciples down and started lecturing them angrily. They couldn't help but wonder why he was so angry about the whole situation. They thought that maybe he wasn't happy that Jiang did well. After the training, all the students went to their various quarters and Jiang, who was not happy with the whole situation, sat on his bed with an unhappy expression. But still, the other students gathered around him, praising him and asking him how he had done it. He had no idea of what they were talking about and he was sweating out of nervousness. He was confused more than they had thought. Seeing that he wasn't saying anything and stated that he had no idea of what had happened, they thought that he was lying and was unhappy and decided to leave him. Jiang could not help but think about the dream he had while cultivating the inner key. Before he came to his senses, he saw himself sitting in a position. He had no idea what position it was, but he knew that it was him sitting there. He could hear them chanting some words, "Long live Jianghu unification." He could hear them loud and clear and he could still hear them right now. He could hear them chanting, "Long live the sun moon." He couldn't help but wonder what it meant. At the founder's quarters, Jiang was praised for stopping Jiang on time because if he hadn't been stopped on time, no one knew what would have happened to him. He would have been in serious trouble. Jiang, who was sweating, could not help but remember what had happened earlier today. He didn't know what would have happened if he hadn't stopped him from cultivating. If he hadn't stopped him earlier today from cultivating, he probably would have gone berserk. For him to be unable to cultivate basic martial arts skills, they had no idea what skill he was going to learn. He nearly fell into Kuei deviation from just learning the basic martial arts skills, 6 harmonies and not just any other martial arts. And when someone falls into K deviation he will shatter into stones. The founder could not help but wonder why someone would fall into Kuei deviation while training the most basic cultivation techniques. It was no different from riding a FO but making it run like a red hare. So for it to be possible, one should possess the same level of energy as a sect leader. Jiang agreed with the founder, but unfortunately Jiang was born with an extremely small ki center, so he is comparable to a normal person. He could not help but wonder if he had some hidden secrets for him to be able to achieve so much today with his basic martial arts skills. Because they knew that Jiang had a very low ki and had been training for years, suddenly a ki deviation occurred, so they suspected that he had other secrets. The founder thought of it for a second and then froze. He was shocked. He had thought of something but was unable to voice out his thoughts. He couldn't help but remember the oath he had made to Jiang's mother when she was alive. He told her that he was going to protect him from demonic cultists no matter what happened. And this oath has always lived in his heart. But he couldn't help but wonder what was going to happen if he died. Who was going to take care of Jiang and protect him from the demonic cultists? Looking at how weak he is, they couldn't help but wonder what would happen if he stepped into the world with how weak he was right now. If he kept stepping into the world, let alone the demonic cult, he would die after being exploited by the 9 great sect, 1 great union. And if he was left alone, it would be no different from watching him die. So the founder decided that it was best for Jiang to leave the academy. Jiang was shocked when he heard the conclusion. Then he pleaded with the founder to let him break the news to Jiang during the comprehensive evaluation day, which takes place once a year. The students gathered at the fighting arena to prepare for the competition. Jiang stood in front of the students and started to tell them that he hoped they would use the skills that they had been honing. As each student walked towards the arena, Jiang suddenly stopped Jiang. He told him to wait behind because he would like to talk to him. When the students there heard what he said, they couldn't help but feel pity for him. Jiang sat down in the room silently with Jiang standing behind him. Jiang knew that it was unusual for him to be this silent. Jiang, sitting down there, thought of the great hero who had died at the hands of Dongfang Bubai. Lian Huan, when he was young he could only watch him from afar. He was someone he admired. Even when he was on his way to a faraway land, to a place where the demonic cult was located, he remained calm. He didn't know how such a person would give birth to a person with a small key center like Jiang. He sat there speechless and disappointed. Jiang was worried because he wasn't used to Jiang being silent at times like that. He was used to the scolding, not the silence. He could only stare at Jiang and wonder if he wanted to teach him some secret plan to succeed at the comprehensive evaluation. But the next words Jiang said shocked Jiang. He told him to leave the academy, that martial arts were not for him. Jiang didn't want Jiang to misunderstand him and boldly told him that he had no martial arts talent. Jiang was not happy when he heard that. He was angry and folded his fists with anger. His first thought was that Jisong took so long to tell him this. His father was the senior brother of the revival sect of Manhwa, so it was more reason for him to stay there. Jiang walked towards him and tapped his shoulder, telling him that it was best he become a high government official and leave martial arts. He told him to take his past as a lesson and leave the sect. Jiang was smarter than most of the disciples in the sect. Jiang then realized that his eldest brother never hated him, although he acted like he did. He then rejected the offer of leaving the academy. He said he would give the evaluation a trial. Jiang was shocked when he heard it and looked at Jiang. He then saw that the blood of a hero does run in his veins. Jiang turned mad, left for the fighting arena. Jiang couldn't help but be proud of Jiang. He was nearly disappointed when he heard he would give it a trial, but later when he heard it was the evaluation he felt relieved. He is indeed the son of Lian Huan. At the comprehensive evaluation, Jiang announced to the students that henceforth, they would be conducting the yearly comprehensive evaluation, which is done once a year. He told them to fight to the best of their ability, to repay the kindness that the founder has given to them. The disciples listened attentively to the instructions given by Wei Jisong. They listened with a serious expression. They knew that they would be the ones to lead Manhua's revival sect in the future, so the evaluation mattered. They stood there, lined up, listening to him while Jiang stood at the front of the arena. The founder watched from the top as the students replied to Jiang. Suddenly, his eyes stopped at Jiang, who stood there with a cold expression. He wondered if the talk between him and Jiang had gone wrong or futile. He turned to Jiang and asked him what had happened and if the discussion between him and Jiang didn't go as planned. Jiang apologized and blamed himself. He told the founder that he tried to persuade him, but Jiang refused. The founder turned to Jiang again. He remembered his eldest brother, who was stubborn like him. He sighed in disbelief. Of all things he had inherited from his father, it wasn't his strength but his stubbornness. It was such a pity that Jiang's mother heard the news about the death of Ling Huan and couldn't take the shock. She was a very beautiful woman that any man would want to have. She was the Empress of Plum Blossom, Lim Yaran, capable of subduing thousands of men with her showmanship. She was the sect's pride. Her beauty rivaled that of the celestial maiden. He had fallen in love with her before, but things didn't work out for them. Then she married his brother. But because of Dongfang Bubai in the war, she couldn't bear the thought that Ling Huan was dead and died after giving birth to Jiang. And he made a promise to her, to keep Jiang safe from demonic hands. Jiang began to call the disciples names for them to step forward. He told them that they would begin the evaluation regardless of their rank in martial arts. He called out the students' names and each student called out stepped forward at the fighting arena. The founder remembered when other sects tried to take the child from him. They didn't want such a powerhouse to be in the Mount H revival sect, but in the end he was just a child lacking in martial arts. He had no martial skills. He just took care of him because of the oath he took to protect him. As the names were being called out, the students complied by stepping forward. But when it got to the last name, the founder stopped Jiang from calling it. He wanted to do it himself. He did something suddenly that made the students look up in amazement. He flew from the top, where he was watching them, and landed in front of the students, who were looking at him with a surprised expression. He called the last name, Lin Hu Jiang, and told him that he would fight among Yum. When they heard the pairing, Jiang was shocked. Chong Yum was the strongest of all the students and Jiang was the weakest with no martial arts skills. When Jiang heard who he was paired with, he was shocked because he hadn't expected that he would be paired with Chang Yum. Chang Yum was the strongest and he was the weakest. The other students were also shocked. Jiang was told to walk up to the stage to begin the evaluation. When they heard the pairing, Jiang was shocked. Chong Yum was the strongest of all the students and Jiang was the weakest with no martial arts skills. When Jiang heard who he was paired with, he was shocked because he hadn't expected that he would be paired with Chang Yum. Chang Yum was the strongest and he was the weakest. The other students were also shocked. Jiang was told to walk up to the stage to begin the evaluation. When the sect founder listened to Jiang's story of Jiang, he knew that it was terminal lucidity, a situation whereby a person in a subconscious state can regain his energy while he is on the verge of death. In the case of a martial artist, he brings out his strongest technique in a semi-conscious state before facing a beautiful death. The typical example was that of his brother Ling Huang, who killed Dongfang Bubai. When Mang Yum heard that his opponent was Jiang, he was shocked. The thought of sparring with someone as weak as Jiang would do him no good. Jiang wondered if the reason the master had paired the two was that he wanted to pressure Jiang to leave the academy, and the only way to do that was to pair him with Chang Yum. He wanted to instill an unbearable sense of frustration in Lin Hu Jiang. Mang Yum's gaze turned cold as he stood in the fighting ring. Jiang was scared out of his wits when he looked at him. He knew walking into the ring was asking for a free beating. Chang Yum was not happy when he saw that Jiang was composed and not acting scared. Then his mind wandered to the fact that the founder and instructor must have given him a secret plan to win the evaluation. He smiled coldly when he thought of that, calling him the son of the great hero who was different from him, the son of a lowly farmer. Chang Yum's words had so much hatred rooted in them, using his background as a means to insult Jiang. Jiang was speechless when he heard what he said. He hadn't expected that from his senior brother, Chong Yum. He could feel the trace of hatred in his words and his gaze. After they both stood on the stage, Jiang declared that the fight should start. Chang Yum decided to make his first move and told Jiang to give it a shot. The fight against Jiang didn't look like sparring at all because it was filled with hatred. He didn't give Jiang the space to attack. When Jiang tried running, he attacked him, leaving him shocked. His next attack shocked the instructor because it was the dual shadow fist. He attacked Jiang with all his might without stopping. Jiang, who was being hit, was finding it hard to stand back up again and retaliate. Jiang could only make sounds that he was in pain. Also, he couldn't fight, so he could only block the attacks that were thrown at him. Even though he was getting tired and was in so much pain, Chong Yum smiled evilly while beating Jiang up. He recounted how he had always hated Jiang. Whenever he looked at him, he couldn't help but remember his past. They couldn't believe that Chang Yum had beaten him up like that, knowing that he wasn't as talented as him. As he was about to feed him the medicine, Jiang opened his eyes and stared at Jiang in a confused manner and asked him what he was doing. With his red, cold eyes, Jiang paused what he was about to do and stared at Jiang for a while in shock before he came back to his senses when he heard his next question. Jiang was shocked when he saw him open his eyes. He looked fine and cold at the same time. His gaze was relaxed, unlike the usual Jiang. But then he couldn't help but wonder if the fight between him and Chang Yum had hurt his brain. Why would he ask if their believers were safe? And who exactly was he talking about? Jiang had no idea what Jiang was talking about. Jiang lay down on the floor, wondering why he, the greatest invincible of the East, was lying down on the floor like that. He is Dongfang Bubai. So why would the great him be lying that way on the floor? Jiang turned to Jiang, who was staring at him, and wondered who he was because he looked like a gorilla. He asked him where he was and asked Jiang who he was. Jiang wondered if Jiang had lost his memory because he hit his head on the floor. Then he concluded that he hit his head on the floor because of how he was acting. Jiang decided to look around him and noticed he was on a sparring platform and wondered why. When he heard that he was beaten up while sparring during the evaluation, he questioned how he could be beaten up as the invincible of the East. And he even coughed out blood because of the fight. Suddenly Jiang Ke called out his name and asked if he really hit his head. Because of the name he was called, memories of who he was flooded into him, starting from when he was a baby to the sparring in his daily life. He was shocked, memories of someone else flooded into his head. Then it occurred to him that he wasn't Lian Huan, but he was his son Lian Hu Jiang. He was even more shocked because this was not the plan. Then he knew that something had gone wrong. He sat there on the floor speechless. Then he heard that he had lost the fight, that he should get down from the stage so that others could continue. Jiang was surprised when he heard that. He smirked with a cold, deadly gaze. How could he, Dongfang Bubai, lose in a fight? And he found it funny that he lost in a fight. He was the invincible of the East, so losing a fight was not in his book. Jiang was shocked when he saw how he was acting like an old man. He was even talking like an old man. And another thing that shocked him was that he was nibbling and acting differently than usual. It was unlike him. Chang Yong was shocked to see Jiang was fine and had told him to continue to guide him. He was like a totally different person. The change in his personality was also shocking because he just displayed the personality of an old man. He made a mockery of him while covering it with a meaningless excuse that he couldn't control his power. That was why he had fought with him like that. He thought that it would anger Jiang if he said a word like that, but Jiang didn't react as he expected. Instead, he played his card cool. Jiang provocatively reminded him that his dual shadow fist had no effect on him since he was still fine and standing, so he would still be able to continue the fight. Jiang exposed him by telling him he would like to see the martial art he was hiding. Since it was sparring, they should use everything they had learned and not hide anything. Jiang told Chang Yum to fight him with the Hu Essence Fist since he had been learning that secretly. Jiang was shocked when he heard Jiang say this. His expression turned cold and dangerous because Chang Yum had learned the Hu Essence Fist without his permission or the master's permission. Hua was well known for sword techniques, but before learning the sword techniques, one must first of all learn the Hua Essence Fist. However, it could only be taught to those the master had approved and not just anyone. He stared at Chang Yum with a cold expression. He had learned the Hu Essence Fist without the master's permission, which was against the sect rules, and he needed to be punished for it. Chang Yum tried to defend himself, saying that he had seen the eldest brother practicing it at midnight. Jiang knew he was lying but ignored him. Jiang tried to get Chang Yum to say the truth by hitting him but was suddenly stopped by the sect master. The sect master laughed and walked to the stage where they were standing. He was happy that Chang Yum had learned the skill, and then he decided to give him special permission to learn it. They were shocked when the sect master had said that. The instructor was shocked that the master had decided to give him special permission to learn the Hua Essence Fist. The instructor turned to where Jiang was standing worriedly because he knew that they had just sparred and he was injured. But Jiang comforted him by saying something shocking to him. Jiang told him to go down, that he would end the fight quickly before he knew it, and he would be fine, so there was nothing much for him to be worried about. When the instructor heard what he said, he was shocked because he was speaking like an old man and he was acting like he had dual personalities. Also, it was unlike him because he knew that Jiang was weak and had no martial arts skill. Chang Yum was shocked when he heard what Jiang had said and thought that he had a problem with his brain. He was annoyed because of what he said. And then they declared that they should resume the fighting. Jiang stood where he was and made a come-on gesture with his hand towards Chang Yum. Chang Yum was angry when he saw what he did and how he looked calm, like it wasn't a serious fight. He was provoked by what Jiang did and then told him that he would make him regret saying those words and that he was also going to wipe the arrogance off his face. He was not happy that Jiang was behaving less concerned about the fight. But Chang Yum had confidence in his fight with Jiang. He made his first move on him, but he dodged the attack calmly. To Chang Yum, the higher he jumped, the greater the power of his flying fist. But to Jiang, the higher one jumps, the more vulnerability they expose. Chang Yum was shocked when Jiang dodged his attack. It was a blow to his ego. He got angry when he thought of that. He turned to make another attack on him but received a surprise attack from Jiang. Jiang gave him a kick in between his legs which shocked him because he hadn't expected that, of all places, Jiang had to attack. It was his manhood area. It was an ultimate defeat for any man and no standing up for a while. Chang Yum called Jiang shameless for using such an attack on him. He stood in place for a while to let the pain reduce. Jiang taunted Chang Yum by questioning his desire to engage in a confrontation despite the evident strength gap. Unyielding, Chang Yum flaunted his power in an attempt to incite Jiang. Jiang forcefully propelled Chang Yum backward with a swift movement of his hands, causing him to crash onto the ground. Internally, the sect founder couldn't help but commend Jiang. Despite lacking great physical strength, Jiang exhibited remarkable speed and agility. Fueled by surprise and anger at Jiang's unexpected speed and strength, Chang Yum, in a fit of rage, labeled Jiang as an. Jiang echoed Chang Yum's earlier words, emphasizing that if he couldn't control his own strength, what options did he really have? Chang Yum's face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment as he vehemently declared his intention to end Jiang's existence, stating that he had endured enough and it was time to conclude it all. Jiang observed with a solemn expression as Chang Yum, fueled by rage, unleashed the formidable essence of Hu Fist, emanating a palpable aura of deadly intent. Inquiring if fear had gripped Jiang, Chang Yum received no verbal response. Undeterred, he asserted that it was too late, confidently declaring his intent to deliver a fatal blow. In response, Jiang calmly countered, stating that they would soon find out if Chang Yum could truly fulfill his claim of ending him with a single strike. Chang Yum poised for an imminent attack, he challenged Jiang to evade the impending blow, laying down the gauntlet in the impending confrontation. Internally, Jiang grappled with the decision of whether to continue avoiding Chang Yum's attacks and retaliate, or allow himself to be struck to prevent any potential misunderstandings. Jiang's initial thoughts centered on the realization that if he were in his original body, he could have effortlessly dispatched Chang Yum with a single swift strike, likening it to crushing an ant. Before it could make contact, despite inhabiting a seemingly feeble form, he remained confident in his ability to achieve the same outcome. Choosing to confront Chang Yum directly, Jiang braced himself for the impending assault. The instructor called out, questioning Jiang's decision to face the attack head-on. As Jiang prepared to step onto the sparring ground, the sect master intervened, intrigued by what Jiang might take in the face of the challenge. Chang Yum initiated the attack, yet Jiang stood motionless, observing without flinching. Collective surprise rippled through the onlookers as Jiang effortlessly countered Chang Yum's assault without sustaining any visible injuries, defying their expectations. Chang Yum, taken aback, suspected that Jiang possessed knowledge about the Hu Essence Fist and inquired about his understanding of it. Jiang calmly revealed that he hadn't even utilized 50% of the Hu Essence Fist, leaving everyone astonished once again. Elaborating on his strategy, Jiang explained the significance of timing in unleashing the Hu Essence Fist, likening it to the plum blossom blooming at its peak. Only when the fist is unleashed during its unrestrained and robust state can its power truly be harnessed. Mastery, he claimed, comes with an understanding akin to recognizing the fragrance of a flower. The shock persisted among the spectators, prompting doubts about Jiang's alleged status as the weakest in the sect. As Jiang stood unscathed in the ring, onlookers stared in amazement. The sect founder couldn't help but marvel inwardly at the strength of the blossoming plum scent. Impressed by Jiang's unexpected prowess, Chang Yum gazed at Jiang in disbelief, questioning when he had acquired the knowledge of the Hua Essence Fist. Jiang, looking upward, pondered for a moment before concluding that he couldn't recall. It had been a long time ago. Deciding to dispense with small talk, Jiang urged them to conclude the fight once and for all, causing Chang Yum to freeze at his words. Shocked, Chang Yum stared at Jiang when he declared that if he wouldn't attack, Ling Hu Jiang? What? Jiang unleashed the plum blossom attack, only to vanish before executing the move, leaving Chang Yum even more astonished. Suddenly reappearing behind Chang Yum, Jiang executed the true move of the Hu Essence Fist, revealing that the flower was merely a distraction. Observing the unexpected spectacle, onlookers among the disciples couldn't believe they were witnessing such a remarkable fight, with some even expressing their emotions through tears and exclamations. After Jiang's successful strike, Chang Yum crumpled to the ground, pondering how Jiang had managed to defeat him. Post-fight, Jiang mockingly bowed and expressed gratitude to Chang Yum for his teachings. A profound silence enveloped the surroundings as spectators needed time to process what they had just witnessed. Disciples surrounded Jiang at the quarters, bombarding him with questions about private lessons and his techniques. Jiang claimed luck, though many doubted his explanation. Jiang questioned why he found himself in Ling Hu Jiang's body instead of Ling Huan, considering the latter's apparent weakness. Contemplating the situation, Jiang wondered if Dongfang Bubai, the great practitioner of the soul-transferring Grand Act, had failed in his attempt. The soul-transferring Grand Act, a legendary demonic practice, allows one to fully transfer souls and control the target's body. Jiang was certain that 14 years ago, he had manipulated Ling Huan's body to destroy his own kind and steal his identity. He selected Ling Huan's body based on its appearance, aiming to enhance the shock factor when revealing the truth in the future. Because of that, he gave Ling Huan the honor of being the great hero who saved the world by killing Dongfang Bubai. Jiang clarified that his actions were designed to infiltrate and destroy the orthodox sect from within while masquerading as Ling Huan, as retribution for betraying the Sun Moon divine cult. The sect instructor sought a meeting with the sect master in his quarters to discuss the unauthorized acquisition of the Hu Essence Fist by Chang Yum. Jiang, upon hearing the report, the sect master agreed with Jiang but instructed him to refrain from intervening with the two disciples, emphasizing that they were destined to lead the sect in the future. The sect master proposed a strategy of collective denial, suggesting that they should pretend the incident never occurred and instead foster the growth of the two young disciples. On the contrary, Jiang found himself unable to sleep, haunted by unresolved questions about potential betrayal trails or complications during the soul transfer process. Mastering the soul-transferring Grand Act proved challenging for Jiang, leading him into a state of chi deviation, a formidable obstacle in his pursuit. Jiang pondered whether the unfolding events were a deliberate trap, especially considering the coincidental opportunity for world domination that lay before him. Despite suspicions, Jiang trusted Zhang Longyun, the loyal subordinate who had discovered and presented the Grand Act to him. Jiang couldn't shake his curiosity about how the situation had unfolded, leaving him in a state of contemplation. He wondered if, during the breakdown of Ling Huan's soul and Dongfang Bubai's attempted suicide, someone had seized the opportunity to kill Ling Huan's now vacant body. The fundamental principle of the soul transferring grand act dictated that the target must be alive, the heart must be beating, establishing an iron rule that Jiang grappled with as he sought answers to his lingering questions. At that time, the only living individuals of significance were him and Ling Huan. Sensing a conspiracy but unable to gather concrete evidence, Jiang's recurring dreams over the past 4 days intensified his suspicions. The vivid imagery included being taken from the Korean peninsula, enduring a brutal incident involving his genitals, and the moment he ascended as the leader of the Sun-Moon divine cult. Coincidentally, upon turning 15, Dongfang Bubai's persona within him awakened, leaving Jiang convinced that more than mere chance was at play. The following day, the instructor instructed everyone to assemble in the training hall for a day focused on individual training. Students eagerly rushed out of their quarters toward the designated training hall. Jiang attempted to sneak out, but the instructor intercepted him, directing him to wait in front of the dormitory for a conversation after the instructor visited the infirmary. In the infirmary, the instructor couldn't help but question Chang Yum about his actions, emphasizing that martial arts are taught to disciples when they are deemed ready. Expressing empathy for Chang Yum's impatience due to poverty, the instructor acknowledged Lian Huan's belief in a brighter future and hoped to instill that gratitude in junior disciples. Acknowledging the breach of institution rules, the instructor warned Chang Yum of impending consequences once he awakened. Despite the admonishment, the instructor conveyed a hope that Chang Yum would understand the motivation behind the actions and wished him a speedy recovery. Upon the instructor's departure, Chang Yum dismissed his words as nonsense. Expressing disbelief in the allegations, he questioned the inconsistency of the institution's response when he used the essence fist, noting their silence despite apparent displeasure. Chang Yum firmly concluded that Jiang had covertly provided him with a manual and personally instructed him in the essence fist. He resolved not to be deceived by sweet words again. Subsequently, he decided to chart his own course and trust no one henceforth. Back at the dormitory, the instructor queried Jiang about how he had acquired knowledge of the Hu essence fist. Speechless and unsure how to respond, Jiang grappled with the dilemma, suppressing the urge to vent his frustration on his elder brother. Finally, he claimed to have observed Chang Yum practicing the technique. Jiang eyed him suspiciously, noting the improper wrapping of Jiang's bandage. Despite the suspicion, Jiang ignored him and looked down at Jiang's bandage, which was wrapped incorrectly, so he helped him in properly dressing it. Memories from Jiang's childhood flooded back, a recollection that Dongfang Bubai found somewhat annoying but not entirely unwelcome. Assessing his current physical state, Jiang resolved to leverage the situation and grow stronger. The instructor, noticing Jiang's inadequate attire, playfully knocked him on the head. Jiang was furious. He was Dongfang Bubai. Why would he be knocked? Pointing to the disheveled dress, the instructor questioned Jiang about his improper attire. Walking over to Jiang, he took the initiative to help him fix his dress, demonstrating both care and guidance. Jiang reflected on the fact that he had never dressed himself, as his maids had attended to such tasks during his time as Bubai in the past. The instructor inquired if Jiang was feeling unwell following the sparring session the previous day. Agreeing, Jiang concocted fictitious body pains to avoid further questioning from the instructor. Observing Jiang's attempt to evade discussion, the instructor assured him that they could address the matter when he felt better. Instructing Jiang to resume regular training, the instructor's apparent oversight of the Hu essence fist discussion relieved Jiang. Exiting to the training ground, Jiang resolved that rigorous training was the key to regaining his strength. The sect master instructed Jiang to let the transgressions of the children pass, acknowledging their breach of sect rules. Aware of the wrongdoing, the sect master justified the leniency, citing the need for new blood, especially since Manhwa had already fallen. Pointing out the presence of new disciples, the sect master asserted that the revival of Manhwa sect had entered a stable phase, emphasizing that the children represented the hope of the sect. The sect master advocated for granting them another chance, considering the future of the sect. The instructor, understanding the sect master's perspective, agreed with the decision and concluded that he comprehended the importance of the sect's future. Jiang grasped the sect master's perspective and suggested that, to prevent a recurrence, they could consider amending the sect rules. The master concurred, stating that they should observe how the sect evolves in the future. Jiang took on the role of an instructor, demonstrating martial art postures to fellow students while the sect master and instructor observed from the top of the quarters.